Something amazing just happened that is changing everything we thought we knew about one of the world's oldest books. Scientists using powerful computer programs called artificial intelligence have found secret codes hidden in the Book of Enoch. These codes have been there for thousands of years, but no human ever found them before. Now, these discoveries are shocking researchers all over the world and making them rethink what ancient people really knew about the universe. The Book of Enoch is not like other old books. It tells the story of a man who walked with God and learned secrets about heaven, angels, giants, and the future. For centuries, most people forgot about this book. But now, artificial intelligence has uncovered mathematical patterns, hidden messages, and scientific knowledge buried in its pages that seem impossible for ancient people to have known. These discoveries are so important that they might change how we understand both ancient wisdom and modern science. What makes these findings even more incredible is that the artificial intelligence found connections between the book's astronomical information and things that quantum physics is just now discovering. The computer programs found patterns in how the words are arranged that follow mathematical rules no human had ever noticed. They discovered that the book contains information about the movement of stars and planets that matches what modern telescopes can see. Most shocking of all, they found evidence that the ancient writer knew things about the universe that science is only beginning to understand today. This is not just about finding an old book. This is about discovering that our ancestors might have had access to knowledge that we are only now beginning to grasp. The artificial intelligence analysis suggests that the Book of Enoch contains layers of meaning and information that go far deeper than anyone ever imagined. What you are about to learn will take you on a journey through one of history's most mysterious books and show you why these new discoveries are causing such excitement in both religious and scientific communities around the world. The man who walked with God. Before we can understand why the Book of Enoch is so special, we need to know about the man himself. Enoch was a real person who lived long ago, and his story is told in the Bible. But Enoch was not like other people. The Bible says something about him that it says about no one else. It tells us that Enoch walked with God, and then one day he was gone because God took him up to heaven while he was still alive. Think about how unusual this is. Everyone else in the Bible died when their time came, even the greatest heroes and prophets, but not Enoch. Genesis chapter 5 tells us that Enoch lived for 365 years. During all that time, he walked with God. This means he had a special friendship and closeness with God that was different from anyone else. Then, instead of dying like everyone else, God simply took him up to heaven. The Bible uses very few words to tell us about Enoch, but those words are powerful. It says that after Enoch had his son Methuselah, he walked with God for 300 years. Walking with God means much more than just believing in God or praying sometimes. It means having such a close relationship with God that you spend your whole life learning from Him and following His ways perfectly. Enoch was chosen by God for something very special. While other people lived their normal lives on earth, Enoch was learning secrets about heaven and the universe that no other human being knew. God was preparing him for a mission that would be more important than anything anyone could imagine. Enoch was going to become God's messenger and recorder of the most important events in the history of the world. What made Enoch so special that God would choose him for this incredible purpose? The Bible tells us that Enoch pleased God. In the book of Hebrews, it explains that Enoch had faith, and without faith, it is impossible to please God. But Enoch's faith was not ordinary faith. It was the kind of complete trust and love for God that allowed him to walk in perfect harmony with the Creator of the universe. Imagine what it would be like to have such a close friendship with God that you could talk to him every day, learn from him constantly, and understand things about the universe that no one else knew. That was Enoch's life. Day after day, year after year, for 3 centuries, he grew closer to God and learned more about the mysteries of creation, the purpose of life, and what God had planned for the future. This special relationship prepared Enoch for what was coming. God knew that terrible things were about to happen on earth. Angels were going to rebel against heaven. Giants would be born who would cause violence and corruption everywhere. The whole world would become so evil that God would have to destroy it with a great flood. Through all of these events, Enoch would serve as God's witness and recorder, making sure that future generations would know exactly what happened and why. When God finally took Enoch up to heaven, it was not just because Enoch was a good man who deserved a reward. It was because God had work for Enoch to do in heaven itself. Enoch was going to see things that no human eyes had ever seen. He was going to learn secrets about the universe, about angels, about the future, and about God's plan for all creation. Then he was going to write it all down so that people thousands of years later would be able to read about it and understand what really happened in the beginning of the world. This is why the Book of Enoch is so important and so different from other ancient books. It was not written by an ordinary person trying to figure out what God might be like. It was written by someone who actually walked with God every day for 300 years. Someone who was taken up to heaven while still alive. Someone who saw God's throne room and learned directly from God himself about the deepest mysteries of existence. The ancient book that changed history. The Book of Enoch is one of the oldest books ever written, but for many centuries, most people had never heard of it. This ancient book contains some of the most amazing stories ever told about angels, giants, heaven, and the secrets of the universe. Understanding what this book is and why it became lost to most of the world is crucial to understanding why the new artificial intelligence discoveries are so important. Scholars believe that different parts of the Book of Enoch were written between 300 and 100 years before Jesus was born. This makes it older than many books that are in the Bible today. The book was originally written in Hebrew and Aramaic, which were the languages that Jewish people spoke in ancient times. For centuries, Jewish teachers and students read this book and considered it to be very important religious writing. What makes this book so special is not just its age, but what it contains. While other ancient books might tell stories about kings and wars, The Book of Enoch tells about things that no human being could have witnessed unless God showed them directly. It describes the throne room of heaven, conversations between God and his angels, the rebellion of angels against God, the birth of giant children who were half angel and half human, and detailed information about how the sun, moon, and stars move through the sky. The book is actually made up of 5 different sections, like 5 books combined into one. The first section tells about the Watchers, who were angels that came down to earth and caused terrible problems. The second section contains parables and prophecies about the future and about someone called the Son of Man, who would come to judge the world. The third section is called the Astronomical Book, and it contains detailed information about calendars, the movement of heavenly bodies, and the secrets of time itself. The fourth section describes amazing visions that Enoch had about the history of the world, from the very beginning all the way to the end times. Using symbols and dreamlike imagery, this section tells the entire story of humanity, including events that had not happened yet when Enoch lived. The fifth section contains letters that Enoch wrote to his descendants, giving them advice about how to live and warning them about what was coming in the future. For hundreds of years, the Book of Enoch was widely read and respected. Jewish teachers quoted from it. Early Christian leaders knew about it and sometimes referred to it in their writings. In fact, the New Testament Book of Jude actually quotes directly from the Book of Enoch, calling Enoch a prophet and using his words to make an important point about God's judgment. But then something happened that caused most of the world to forget about this incredible book. As Christianity spread throughout the Roman Empire and beyond, church leaders began to make decisions about which books should be included in the official Bible and which books should not be included. These decisions were not made lightly, but they were made by human beings who had to use their best judgment about what God wanted. Most Christian church leaders decided not to include the Book of Enoch in their official Bible collections. They had several reasons for this decision. Some worried that the book contained ideas that might confuse people or lead them away from the simple message of salvation through Jesus Christ. Others questioned whether the book had really been written by the ancient Enoch, or whether it had been written much later by someone else using Enoch's name. There were also concerns about some of the book's teachings. The Book of Enoch spends a lot of time talking about angels and their activities, and some church leaders worried that this might cause people to focus too much on angels instead of focusing on God. The book also contains detailed descriptions of heaven and the future that go far beyond what is described in other biblical books, and some leaders felt that these descriptions were too speculative. As a result of these decisions, the Book of Enoch gradually disappeared from most Christian communities. Copies of the book became rare, and eventually, most people forgot that it had ever existed. For more than 1,000 years, the book was essentially lost to the Western world. Scholars knew that such a book had once existed because other ancient writers mentioned it, but no one could find a complete copy anywhere. However, the book was not completely lost. In the mountains of Ethiopia, the Ethiopian Orthodox Church had kept the Book of Enoch as part of their official Bible all along. They never stopped reading it or copying it, and they always believed that it was genuine scripture that belonged in the Bible. Thanks to their faithfulness in preserving this book, complete copies survived even when the rest of the world had forgotten about it. In the late 1700s, a Scottish explorer named James Bruce travelled to Ethiopia and brought back copies of the Book of Enoch to Europe. This was the first time in over 1,000 years that most of the world had access to this ancient book. When scholars began to study it, they realized what an incredible treasure had been preserved by the Ethiopian church. The rediscovery of the Book of Enoch created great excitement among scholars who studied ancient religion and history. Here was a book that was older than many books in the Bible, a book that contained stories and ideas that helped explain things that were mentioned briefly in the Bible but never fully explained. Suddenly, scholars had access to detailed accounts of events that the Bible only hinted at. When angels broke heaven's rules. One of the most shocking parts of the Book of Enoch tells the story of angels who decided to leave heaven and come down to earth. This was not supposed to happen. Angels were created to serve God and follow His commands perfectly. But according to the Book of Enoch, 200 angels made a terrible decision that would change the course of human history and bring corruption and violence to the entire world. These angels were called watchers, and their job was to watch over the earth and make sure everything was going according to God's plan. They were powerful, beautiful beings who lived in heaven and had access to all kinds of knowledge and abilities that humans did not have. For a long time, they did their job faithfully, watching and reporting back to God about what was happening on earth. But then, something went wrong. As the watchers observed human beings living on earth, they began to feel desires that angels were never supposed to have. They saw that human women were beautiful, and they wanted to marry them and have families with them. This was completely against God's design. Angels and humans were created to be different kinds of beings, and they were never supposed to mix together in this way. The leader of these rebellious angels was named Samyaza, and he was not just any ordinary angel. He was one of the most important and powerful angels in heaven. When Samyaza first suggested that the angels should come down to earth and marry human women, the other angels were afraid. They knew this would be a terrible sin against God, and they knew that God would punish them severely if they did such a thing. Samyaza understood their fear, so he came up with a plan to make sure that all the angels would be equally guilty. He told them that they should all swear an oath together, promising that they would all participate in this rebellion, and that none of them would abandon the plan once they had started. This way, no single angel could change his mind and escape punishment by turning the others into God. The Book of Enoch tells us exactly where this oath-taking ceremony happened. The 200 angels gathered on the summit of Mount Hermon, which is a real mountain that still exists today on the border between Israel and Lebanon. There, on that mountain top, they swore their terrible oath and committed themselves to a course of action that would bring disaster to both heaven and earth. The book even gives us the names of the leaders of this rebellion. Besides Samyaza, there was Arachiel, Ramiel, Kokabiel, Tamiel, Daniel, Chazakiel, Barakiel, Asael, Armaros, Batariel, Bezaliel, Ananiel, Zachiel, Shamsiel, Satariel, Turiel, Yomiel, and Sariel. These were not minor angels or unimportant spirits. These were some of the most powerful and knowledgeable beings in all of creation, angels who had been trusted with great responsibility and authority. Once they had sworn their oath, the angels descended from Mount Hermon and began to carry out their plan. They approached human women and used their supernatural beauty and power to win their affections. Soon, many of these women were married to angels and expecting children. But these were not going to be ordinary children. They were going to be something that had never existed before in the world. What the angels had done was not just a personal sin that affected only themselves. By mixing the supernatural nature of angels with the natural nature of humans, they had corrupted the very foundations of creation. God had made angels to be one kind of being and humans to be another kind of being. Each had their own proper place and purpose in creation. When the Watchers crossed that boundary, they introduced chaos and corruption into the world that would spread and grow until it threatened to destroy everything. The rebellion of the Watchers was also a direct challenge to God's authority. These angels were essentially saying that they knew better than God did about how the world should work. They were putting their own desires ahead of God's commands and God's design for creation. This was the same kind of pride and rebellion that had led to Satan's fall from heaven, but now it was happening on a much larger scale. According to the Book of Enoch, the consequences of this rebellion began to appear very quickly. The children who were born from the union of angels and human women were not normal human children. They were giants, beings of enormous size and strength, who inherited supernatural abilities from their angel fathers, but also inherited the fallen nature and physical limitations of their human mothers. These giants would soon become a terror to everyone on Earth. But the rebellion of the Watchers was about to get even worse. Not content with simply marrying human women and having giant children, the fallen angels began to share secrets with humanity that were never supposed to be revealed. They began teaching humans knowledge and skills that belonged only in heaven, knowledge that humans were not ready for and that would cause great harm when used by beings with sinful hearts. The stage was now set for a period of chaos and violence unlike anything the world had ever seen. The Watchers had broken the most fundamental rules of creation, and the consequences would be terrible. Giants would roam the earth, causing destruction. Humans would learn dangerous secrets that they would use to harm each other. Violence and corruption would spread everywhere until God Himself would have to intervene to save His creation from complete destruction. Forbidden secrets from heaven. The fallen angels did not stop with just marrying human women and having giant children. They made their rebellion even worse by sharing secrets from heaven that were never meant for human beings to know. These were not just ordinary pieces of information. These were powerful secrets about how the universe worked, secrets that could be used to create great beauty or terrible destruction, depending on the heart of the person who used them. The Book of Enoch tells us exactly what kinds of forbidden knowledge the Watchers taught to humanity. The angel Azazel was the one who taught humans how to make weapons of war. Before this time, people might have fought with sticks and stones, but they did not know how to make swords and knives and shields and armor. Azazel showed them how to find metals in the earth and how to work with fire and hammers to create weapons that could kill much more efficiently than anything humans had known before. But Azazel did not stop with teaching about weapons. He also taught humans about metals and jewelry and decorations. He showed women how to use antimony to make their eyes look more beautiful, and he taught them about all kinds of costly stones and coloring materials that could be used to make themselves more attractive. This might not sound like something terrible, but the Book of Enoch suggests that these teachings led to vanity and pride and a focus on outward appearance rather than inner character. Other fallen angels taught different kinds of forbidden knowledge. Semjaza taught humans about enchantments and magic spells. He showed them how to cut roots and use them in magical ways that could influence other people or cause supernatural things to happen. This was the beginning of witchcraft and sorcery, practices that would lead people away from trusting in God and toward trusting in dark spiritual powers. Armaros taught humans how to break enchantments and undo magical spells that other people had cast. Barakiel taught astrology, which is the practice of trying to predict the future or understand personality by studying the movements of stars and planets. Kokabiel taught about the constellations and their meanings. Ezekiel taught humans how to understand the knowledge of clouds and weather patterns. Arakiel showed people how to read signs in the earth, probably including things like earthquakes and volcanic activity. Shamsiel taught about the signs of the sun, helping humans understand solar eclipses and other solar phenomena. Sariel taught about the course of the moon, including lunar eclipses and the phases of the moon, and how they could be used to predict certain events. All of this knowledge might seem harmless or even helpful to us today, but the Book of Enoch presents it as forbidden knowledge that caused great harm to humanity. The problem was not necessarily with the knowledge itself, but with the fact that humans were not spiritually mature enough to handle such powerful information. When people who had sinful hearts gained access to supernatural knowledge, they used it in ways that caused corruption, violence, and turning away from God. Think about what happened when humans learned to make advanced weapons. Instead of using this knowledge to protect the innocent or to hunt for food more efficiently, they began to use it to attack each other. Wars became more deadly. Strong people used their better weapons to oppress weak people. The knowledge that could have been a blessing became a curse because it was given to people whose hearts were not right with God. The same thing happened with the knowledge of magic and astrology. Instead of using this information to better understand God's creation, people began to use it to try to control supernatural forces for their own benefit. They started worshipping stars and planets instead of worshipping the God who created them. They began to trust in spells and enchantments instead of trusting in prayer and faith. Even the knowledge about beauty and decoration became corrupting. When people learned new ways to make themselves attractive, they became vain and proud. They began to value outward appearance more than inner character. Men and women became more focused on how they looked than on how they acted toward God and toward each other. The Book of Enoch tells us that as this forbidden knowledge spread among humans, godliness decreased and corruption increased. People became more violent, more selfish, and more interested in material things than in spiritual things. The knowledge that the Watchers shared was like giving powerful tools to children who did not understand how dangerous they could be. This part of the Book of Enoch teaches us something important about knowledge and wisdom. Just because something can be known does not mean it should be known by everyone at every time. There is a difference between information and wisdom. Information is just facts and techniques, but wisdom is knowing how to use information in ways that honor God and help other people. The Watchers gave humans powerful information, but they did not give them the wisdom to use it properly. God had not hidden this knowledge from humans because he wanted to keep them ignorant or powerless. He had kept it hidden because he knew that humans needed to grow spiritually before they could handle such powerful information safely. The Watchers, in their rebellion, shared these secrets before humans were ready, and the result was disaster for everyone involved. This is why the Book of Enoch presents the sharing of forbidden knowledge as one of the greatest sins of the Watchers. They were not just disobeying God's commands about not marrying human women. They were also corrupting humanity by giving them access to power and information that they were not spiritually prepared to handle responsibly. The consequences of this corruption would soon become apparent as the giant offspring of the Watchers began to terrorize the earth. The birth of giants, the marriage between the fallen angels and human women, produced children unlike anything the world had ever seen. These were not ordinary human beings, and they were not angels either. They were something new and terrible, creatures that combined the supernatural power of their angel fathers with the physical nature of their human mothers. The Book of Enoch calls them Nephilim, which means giants, and they quickly became a source of terror and destruction for everyone on earth. The Book of Enoch tells us that these giants were enormous in size. It says their height was 300 ells, which would make them about 450 feet tall. Even if this number is symbolic rather than literal, it clearly indicates that these beings were much larger and stronger than normal humans. Imagine creatures that were not just a little bit bigger than regular people, but so huge that they towered over everyone like living mountains. But their size was not the only thing that made the Nephilim dangerous. They also inherited supernatural abilities from their angel fathers. They were much stronger than any human being could ever be. They were probably more intelligent than normal humans. They may have had access to some of the knowledge that their fathers had brought down from heaven. In every way that mattered, they were superior to regular human beings in terms of physical and mental capabilities. At first, this might not have seemed like a serious problem. After all, having some very large, very strong, very smart people in the world might have been seen as a good thing. These giants could have used their abilities to help humanity, to protect people from wild animals, to build great structures, or to make life easier and safer for everyone. Unfortunately, that is not what happened. The problem was that the Nephilim inherited more than just size and strength from their parents. They also inherited the rebellious nature of their fallen angel fathers and the sinful nature of their human mothers. They were creatures of enormous power, but they had hearts that were turned away from God and focused on satisfying their own desires. This combination of supernatural ability and sinful nature made them incredibly dangerous. The Book of Enoch describes how the giants began to consume everything that humans had worked to produce. At first, people probably tried to feed the giants and take care of them, thinking of them as part of their communities. But the giants had enormous appetites that matched their enormous size. They ate so much food that regular people began to run out of things to eat. All the crops and livestock that human families depended on for survival were being consumed by these massive beings. When the giants had eaten everything that humans could provide, they did not simply go away or find other sources of food. Instead, they turned against the very people who had tried to feed them. The Book of Enoch tells us that the giants began to devour human beings themselves. These creatures, who were part human through their mothers, began to eat the flesh and drink the blood of their human relatives. But even this was not the end of their terrible behavior. The giants also began to attack and eat animals of all kinds. They consumed birds and beasts and reptiles and fish. They seemed to have an endless hunger that could never be satisfied, no matter how much they ate. They were like a plague of massive locusts, devouring everything living that they could find. The violence of the giants was not limited to eating everything in sight. They also began to fight against each other. With their supernatural strength and size, their battles were incredibly destructive. When giants fought, the damage they caused affected everyone around them. Buildings were destroyed, landscapes were changed, innocent people were killed just by being too close to the fighting. As the giants spread across the earth, they brought chaos and terror everywhere they went. Normal human life became almost impossible. People could not farm safely because giants might come and eat all their crops. They could not raise animals because giants might devour their livestock. They could not even live peacefully in their communities because giants might attack and destroy their homes. The Book of Enoch also suggests that the giants learned some of the forbidden knowledge that their fallen angel fathers had brought from heaven. This made them even more dangerous. They were not just mindless monsters with enormous strength. They were intelligent beings who could use supernatural knowledge to cause even greater harm. They became leaders of violence and corruption, teaching other humans to be more wicked and turning the whole world away from God. Some of the giants may have become rulers over human communities, using their superior strength and abilities to force people to obey them. Others may have become teachers of the forbidden arts that their fathers had learned in heaven. Still others may have become warriors who led armies of humans in increasingly destructive wars against each other. The presence of the giants on Earth created a downward spiral of violence and corruption that affected everyone. As the giants caused more destruction, humans became more desperate and more willing to do terrible things to survive. As humans learned more of the forbidden knowledge, they became more corrupt and more violent themselves. The whole world was becoming a place of chaos and evil, where the strong oppressed the weak, and where violence was the normal way of solving problems. According to the Book of Enoch, the situation became so bad that the very foundations of the earth were being shaken. The natural order that God had established at creation was being destroyed by these hybrid beings who were never supposed to exist. The giants were not just causing individual acts of violence, they were corrupting the entire world system and threatening to make it impossible for righteous people to live according to God's will. This is why the Book of Enoch presents the birth and growth of the Nephilim as such a catastrophic event. These giants were not just unusual people who happened to be very large. They were evidence that the fundamental order of creation had been violated. They represented a corruption of both the angelic realm and the human realm, and their very existence was a threat to everything that God had created to be good and beautiful and orderly. Heaven responds to Earth's crisis. While the earth was being terrorized by giants and corrupted by forbidden knowledge, heaven was not unaware of what was happening. The Book of Enoch tells us that the faithful angels who had remained loyal to God were watching the destruction with great concern. 4 of the most powerful archangels decided that they had to report this crisis directly to God and ask for his intervention to save creation from complete destruction. These 4 archangels were Michael, Gabriel, Raphael, and Uriel. Each of them had special responsibilities in God's kingdom, and each of them understood how serious the situation on earth had become. They could see that the rebellion of the 200 Watchers was threatening to destroy everything that God had made. If something was not done quickly, the corruption would spread until there was nothing good left on earth. Michael was the warrior angel, the one who led God's armies against evil forces. Gabriel was the messenger angel, the one who carried God's most important communications to human beings. Raphael was the healing angel, the one who brought God's restoration and wholeness to those who needed it. Uriel was the angel of God's judgment, the one who carried out God's justice when evil needed to be punished. Together, these 4 archangels approached God's throne and presented their report about what was happening on earth. They told God about how the Watchers had abandoned their posts in heaven and had gone down to earth to marry human women. They reported about the giants who had been born from these forbidden marriages and about the terrible violence and destruction that the giants were causing everywhere. They also reported about the forbidden knowledge that the fallen angels were teaching to humans. They explained how this knowledge was being used to create more effective weapons, to practice magic and sorcery, and to turn people away from worshipping God toward worshipping created things like stars and planets. They described how the corruption was spreading from person to person and from community to community until the whole earth was being affected. The archangels did not just report the problems, they also asked God to do something about them. They pleaded with God to intervene before it was too late to save anything good on earth. They asked for permission to punish the fallen angels and to stop the giants from causing more destruction. They wanted God to take action to restore the proper order of creation and to protect the righteous people who were still trying to live according to His will. The Book of Enoch tells us that God listened to the report of the archangels and that He was indeed angry about what had been happening on earth. The rebellion of the Watchers was not just a small problem that could be ignored. It was a direct attack on God's authority and on the good order of creation. God could not allow such rebellion to continue without consequences. God's response was swift and decisive. He gave each of the 4 archangels specific missions to carry out that would address different aspects of the crisis. Each angel would play a crucial role in God's plan to judge the wicked, protect the righteous, and restore proper order to both heaven and earth. First, God sent Uriel to warn Noah about what was coming. Noah was one of the few righteous men left on earth, and God had chosen him to preserve the human race through the terrible judgment that was about to fall. Uriel was told to go to Noah and explain that God was going to destroy the entire world with a great flood. He was to tell Noah exactly what he needed to do to build an ark that would save his family and representatives of all the animal species. The message that Uriel brought to Noah was both terrifying and hopeful. It was terrifying because it meant that the corruption on earth had become so complete that God saw no way to fix it except to start over completely. But it was also hopeful because it meant that God was not going to let evil triumph permanently. He was going to preserve the good and destroy the evil, giving the world a chance for a fresh beginning. Next, God gave Raphael a mission to deal with Azazel, the fallen angel who had taught humans how to make weapons and had been one of the leaders in sharing forbidden knowledge. Raphael was commanded to bind Azazel hand and foot and to cast him into a pit in the desert. This pit was to be covered with rough and jagged rocks, and Azazel was to be left there in darkness until the day of final judgment, when he would be thrown into the fire forever. This punishment of Azazel was important because it showed that God would not allow those who corrupted His creation to escape justice. Azazel had used his position as an angel to cause great harm to humanity, and now he would face the consequences of his rebellion. The punishment was severe because the crime was severe. When beings who are given great power and responsibility misuse that power to harm others, they must face judgment that matches the seriousness of their actions. God also commanded Raphael to heal the earth that had been corrupted by the fallen angels and to announce that this healing was taking place. The corruption that had spread across the world was not permanent. God had the power to restore what had been damaged and to make the earth clean and beautiful again. This healing would begin after the flood had washed away the corruption and violence that the giants and fallen angels had brought. Gabriel received instructions about dealing with the Nephilim giants themselves. God told Gabriel to cause the giants to fight against each other until they destroyed themselves. Since the giants had been causing violence and destruction everywhere they went, God's justice decreed that they would be destroyed by the very violence that they had been spreading. They would turn their supernatural strength against each other until none of them remained alive. This was a fitting punishment for the giants because they had refused to use their great abilities to help and protect others. Instead, they had used their strength to consume and destroy everything around them. Now their own destructive nature would be turned back on themselves, and they would experience the same violence that they had been inflicting on innocent people. Finally, God gave Michael the task of dealing with Samyaza and the other watchers who had led the rebellion. Michael was told to bind these fallen angels and to imprison them in valleys of the earth for 70 generations. After that time, they would be brought to the final judgment and condemned to eternal fire. Like their leader Azazel, they would face punishment that matched the severity of their crimes against heaven and earth. The imprisonment of the Watchers was important because it meant that they could no longer continue corrupting the earth or teaching forbidden knowledge to humans. Their rebellion would be stopped, and they would no longer be able to influence human affairs. The world would have a chance to recover from their destructive influence and to return to the proper relationship between heaven and earth. Enoch becomes heaven's messenger. During this time of crisis and judgment, Enoch found himself playing a unique and important role in the drama that was unfolding between heaven and earth. The fallen angels, realizing that they were about to face terrible punishment from God, decided to ask Enoch to intercede for them. They knew that Enoch had a special relationship with God, and they hoped that perhaps he could convince God to show them mercy and reduce their punishment. The choice of Enoch as their potential intercessor was not accidental. The Watchers knew that Enoch was different from other human beings. They had observed his close walk with God over many years, and they understood that he had access to God that no other human possessed. If anyone could speak to God on their behalf and have any chance of success, it would be Enoch. The fallen angels approached Enoch with great humility and desperation. They confessed their sins to him and acknowledged that they had done terrible wrong by leaving their positions in heaven, by marrying human women, and by teaching forbidden knowledge to humanity. They admitted that their actions had brought corruption and violence to the earth, and that they deserved to be punished for their rebellion. But even though they acknowledged their guilt, the Watchers still hoped for mercy. They asked Enoch to write a petition for them, a formal request for forgiveness that he could present to God on their behalf. They wanted him to ask God to reduce their punishment, or perhaps to give them another chance to prove that they could be faithful servants again. Enoch agreed to write the petition that the fallen angels requested. This was not because he thought they deserved mercy, but because he was willing to serve as an honest messenger between them and God. He wrote down their confession and their request for mercy, and then he brought this petition before God's throne in heaven. This was a solemn responsibility, and Enoch carried it out faithfully, even though he probably knew what God's answer would be. When Enoch presented the petition to God, the response was not what the fallen angels had hoped to hear. God made it clear that there would be no mercy for the Watchers who had led the rebellion. Their punishment would stand as decreed. They had been given positions of great trust and authority in heaven, and they had chosen to abuse that trust for their own selfish desires. The consequences of their actions were too serious to be overlooked or forgiven. God's refusal to show mercy to the Watchers was not based on harshness or lack of compassion. It was based on justice and the need to maintain order in creation. If angels could rebel against God, corrupt the earth, and then receive forgiveness simply by asking for it, this would encourage other angels to rebel in the future. The punishment of the Watchers served as a warning to all created beings that rebellion against God carries serious and permanent consequences. However, God did not simply reject the petition and send Enoch away. Instead, he gave Enoch a much more important mission. God told Enoch that he was to serve as heaven's official recorder and messenger for all the events that were taking place. Enoch would be the one to write down the complete account of what the Watchers had done, what punishments they received, and what lessons humanity should learn from these events. This was an enormous responsibility. Enoch was being asked to serve as the official historian for some of the most important events in the history of creation. His writings would preserve the true account of the rebellion of the Watchers, the birth of the giants, and God's judgment on both. Future generations would depend on Enoch's record to understand what had really happened during this critical time. To prepare Enoch for this mission, God decided to give him access to knowledge and experiences that no other human being would ever have. God was going to take Enoch on tours of heaven itself, showing him the throne room of God, the dwelling places of angels, the secrets of the universe, and the plans that God had for the future of creation. Everything that Enoch saw and learned during these heavenly journeys would become part of the record that he was to leave for future generations. The Book of Enoch tells us that during this time, Enoch was taken up into heaven while he was still alive. This was not his final translation to heaven that is mentioned in Genesis, but rather a series of temporary visits that allowed him to see things that earthbound humans could never see. During these visits, Enoch walked through the halls of heaven, stood before God's throne, conversed with archangels, and learned secrets about the workings of the universe that would amaze people thousands of years later. Enoch's role as heaven's messenger and recorder was crucial for several reasons. First, it ensured that the true account of these events would be preserved accurately. Without Enoch's record, future generations might have only fragmentary or distorted accounts of what had happened during the time of the Watchers. Second, it provided humanity with detailed information about God's standards of justice and his expectations for created beings. Third, Enoch's writings would serve as a warning to future generations about the consequences of rebellion against God and the dangers of seeking forbidden knowledge. The detailed account of what happened to the Watchers and the giants would help people understand why it is important to stay within the boundaries that God has established for human life. Finally, Enoch's heavenly experiences would allow him to write about things that would encourage and comfort righteous people during difficult times. His visions of God's throne, his knowledge of God's future plans, and his understanding of the ultimate triumph of good over evil would provide hope for people who were struggling to remain faithful in a corrupt world. As Enoch began his work as heaven's official recorder, he was probably overwhelmed by the magnitude of what he was being asked to do. But his long experience of walking with God had prepared him for this moment. His relationship with God gave him the spiritual strength and wisdom he needed to carry out this crucial mission faithfully and accurately. Journeys through the heavenly realms. The most amazing part of Enoch's experience was when God took him on incredible journeys through heaven itself. These were not dreams or visions that Enoch had while sleeping. According to the Book of Enoch, these were actual trips where Enoch's spirit was taken up from earth into the heavenly realms, where he could see and experience things that no other human being had ever witnessed. The first thing that struck Enoch about heaven was how different it was from anything on earth. The Book of Enoch describes places of incredible beauty and light, where everything was perfect and nothing was corrupted or damaged. There were no signs of the violence and destruction that the giants were causing on earth. Instead, everything in heaven reflected the perfect character and infinite power of God Himself. During his journeys, Enoch was guided by angels who served as his teachers and tour guides. These faithful angels, who had never joined the rebellion of the Watchers, were eager to help Enoch understand what he was seeing and to explain the significance of everything he experienced. They knew that Enoch would need to write about these things for future generations, so they made sure he understood everything clearly. One of the most important places that Enoch visited was the throne room of God Himself. The Book of Enoch attempts to describe this indescribable experience using human language, but it acknowledges that no words can truly capture the majesty and glory of God's presence. Enoch saw God seated on a throne that blazed with light, brighter than the sun, surrounded by thousands upon thousands of angels who praised and worshipped Him continuously. The experience of standing in God's presence was both wonderful and terrifying for Enoch. It was wonderful because it allowed him to see the source of all love, beauty, and goodness in the universe. But it was also terrifying because it showed him how holy and powerful God really was, and how small and imperfect human beings were in comparison. Enoch realized that he was experiencing something that no mortal being should be able to survive, and he was only able to endure it because God was specially protecting him. During his time in the throne room, Enoch learned about God's perfect justice and His plans for dealing with evil in the universe. He saw how God grieved over the rebellion of the Watchers and the corruption that had spread across the earth, but he also saw God's determination to restore righteousness and peace to His creation. This gave Enoch a deeper understanding of why the coming flood was necessary and how it fit into God's larger plan for the universe. Enoch was also taken to see the places where the fallen angels were being imprisoned as punishment for their rebellion. These were dark, terrible places of torment where the Watchers would remain until the final judgment. Seeing these places of punishment helped Enoch understand how seriously God viewed the sin of the fallen angels and why there could be no mercy for them despite their pleas for forgiveness. But Enoch's heavenly tours were not limited to seeing places of judgment and punishment. He was also taken to beautiful regions of heaven, where righteous people would live after death, and where faithful angels carried out their duties of serving God and caring for His creation. These places filled Enoch with hope and joy as he realized that God's ultimate plan was not just to punish evil, but to create a perfect home for all those who loved and served Him faithfully. One of the most fascinating parts of Enoch's heavenly experience was learning about the structure and operation of the universe itself. The angels showed him how the sun, moon, and stars moved through their courses according to God's design. They explained the laws that govern the changing of seasons, the patterns of weather, and the cycles of day and night. This was not just scientific information, but spiritual knowledge that helped Enoch understand how God's wisdom and power were displayed in every aspect of creation. Enoch learned that there were angels assigned to oversee every aspect of the natural world. There were angels responsible for guiding the sun along its path, angels who controlled the phases of the moon, angels who managed the movements of the stars, and angels who directed the winds and weather patterns. This helped Enoch understand that nothing in nature happened by accident or chance. Everything was under the careful supervision of God and His angelic servants. The angels also taught Enoch about time itself and how God had organized the calendar that humans should follow. This was not just practical information about when to plant crops or celebrate festivals. It was spiritual knowledge about how human life should be synchronized with the rhythms that God had built into creation. The proper calendar was a way for humans to live in harmony with God's design for the universe. During his heavenly journeys, Enoch was also given visions of the future that showed him what would happen on Earth in the centuries and millennia to come. He saw the flood that would destroy the corrupt world of his time, but he also saw the new world that would emerge after the flood. He saw the rise and fall of nations, the coming of great teachers and prophets, and ultimately the arrival of a special person who would be called the Son of Man and who would establish God's kingdom of righteousness on earth. These prophetic visions were some of the most important parts of Enoch's heavenly experience because they showed him that despite all the evil and corruption that he saw around him, God had a plan that would ultimately triumph. The rebellion of the Watchers and the violence of the giants were serious problems, but they were not the end of the story. God was working toward a future where righteousness would prevail and where all creation would live in peace and harmony. Perhaps most importantly, Enoch's time in heaven gave him a deep personal relationship with God that went far beyond what any other human being had experienced. He was not just learning facts and information about heaven and the future. He was coming to know God's character, God's heart, and God's love for His creation in an intimate and personal way. This relationship would sustain Enoch through all the difficulties of his earthly mission and would ultimately prepare him for his final translation to heaven. The Divine Calendar and Cosmic Secrets. One of the most remarkable sections of the Book of Enoch is called the Astronomical Book, and it contains detailed information about calendars, the movement of heavenly bodies, and the secrets of how time itself works according to God's design. This information was so advanced and so precise that for centuries, scholars wondered how ancient people could have known such things. Now, with the new artificial intelligence discoveries, we are beginning to understand that this knowledge may have been even more sophisticated than anyone realized. During his journeys through heaven, Enoch was taken to meet Uriel, the archangel who was responsible for overseeing the movements of the sun, moon, and stars. Uriel became Enoch's special teacher for understanding the cosmic order that God had established when he created the universe. Under Uriel's guidance, Enoch learned secrets about astronomy and timekeeping that would amaze modern scientists. The most important thing that Uriel taught Enoch was about the proper calendar that God wanted humanity to follow. This was not just a practical matter of knowing when to plant crops or celebrate holidays. The calendar was a spiritual issue that affected humanity's ability to live in harmony with God's design for creation. Getting the calendar right was essential for maintaining the proper relationship between heaven and earth. According to the Book of Enoch, God's perfect calendar contains exactly 364 days in every year. This number was not chosen randomly. It was specifically designed so that the year would contain exactly 52 weeks of 7 days each. This meant that every date in the calendar would always fall on the same day of the week, year after year, creating a perfect pattern that never varied or drifted out of alignment. The 364-day year was divided into 4 seasons of exactly 91 days each. Each season contained 3 months, with the first 2 months of each season having 30 days and the third month having 31 days. This created a perfectly balanced system where every season was exactly the same length and where the calendar maintained mathematical precision that human calendars have never been able to achieve. Most remarkably, this calendar was designed so that every year would begin on the same day of the week. According to the Book of Enoch, every year begins on Wednesday, which was the 4th day of creation when God created the sun, moon, and stars. This connection between the calendar and the creation account was not accidental. It was designed to remind people constantly of God's role as the creator and sustainer of all the rhythms of life. The precision of this calendar system was far beyond anything that ancient civilizations normally achieved. Most ancient calendars were based on lunar cycles that created years of varying lengths and required constant adjustments to keep them synchronized with the seasons. But God's calendar needed no adjustments. It was perfectly designed from the beginning to maintain exact alignment between the solar year, the weekly cycle, and the seasonal patterns forever. Uriel also taught Enoch detailed information about how the sun moves through the sky during different seasons of the year. The Book of Enoch describes 12 different gates in the eastern sky through which the sun rises at different times of the year, and 12 corresponding gates in the western sky through which the sun sets. During the summer months, the sun uses gates that are farther north, creating longer days. During the winter months, the sun uses gates that are farther south, creating shorter days. This description of the sun's annual movement is remarkably accurate when compared to modern astronomical knowledge. The Book of Enoch correctly explains that the changing length of days throughout the year is caused by the sun following different paths across the sky during different seasons. This understanding of solar astronomy was quite advanced for its time and demonstrates a level of knowledge that would be impressive even by today's standards. The Book of Enoch also contains detailed information about the phases of the moon and how the lunar cycle relates to the solar year. Enoch learned that the moon goes through its complete cycle of phases every 29.5 days, and that 12 lunar months total only 354 days, which is 10 days shorter than the solar year of 364 days. This understanding of the relationship between solar and lunar cycles was crucial for creating accurate calendar systems. But the astronomical knowledge in the Book of Enoch goes far beyond just calendars and basic observations of the sun and moon. Enoch was taught about the movements of stars and constellations, about the structure of the heavens, and about cosmic forces that influence life on Earth. He learned about different types of winds and weather patterns, about the water cycle that brings rain to the Earth, and about the geological processes that shape the landscape. Some of the most intriguing parts of the astronomical book describe what appear to be multiple levels or dimensions of heaven, each with its own characteristics and inhabitants. Enoch writes about traveling through different regions of the heavenly realm, each more glorious and perfect than the last, until he reaches the very throne room of God himself. These descriptions have led some modern readers to wonder whether Enoch was being taught about aspects of reality that modern physics is only beginning to discover. The level of detail and accuracy in the astronomical sections of the Book of Enoch has always puzzled scholars. How could ancient people, without telescopes or modern instruments, have known such precise information about the movements of heavenly bodies? How could they have developed such a sophisticated understanding of calendar systems and astronomical cycles? These questions have become even more intriguing in light of the recent artificial intelligence discoveries. What makes the astronomical sections even more remarkable is that they were not written as abstract scientific treatises. They were presented as spiritual and religious knowledge that was directly relevant to how people should live their daily lives. The calendar was not just a tool for measuring time. It was a way for humans to align their lives with the cosmic order that God had established. Following the proper calendar was a form of worship and obedience that connected people to the larger patterns of creation. This integration of scientific knowledge with spiritual truth was characteristic of Enoch's entire approach to recording what he had learned in heaven. He did not separate facts about astronomy from truths about God's character and God's plans for creation. For Enoch, understanding how the universe worked was inseparable from understanding who God was and how humans should relate to their Creator. This holistic approach to knowledge may be one of the most important insights that modern readers can gain from studying the Book of Enoch. Visions of the coming Messiah. Among the most important parts of the Book of Enoch are the prophetic visions that Enoch received about the future of the world and about a special person who would come to establish God's kingdom of righteousness on earth. These prophecies were given to Enoch thousands of years before Jesus was born, but they describe someone who sounds remarkably similar to the Jesus that Christians worship today. This has made these sections of the Book of Enoch especially interesting to people who want to understand how God revealed his plans for salvation throughout history. In his visions of the future, Enoch saw someone who was called by several different titles. Sometimes this person was called the Righteous One, sometimes the Chosen One, sometimes the Anointed One or Messiah, and most frequently, the Son of Man. Each of these titles revealed something important about who this person would be and what he would accomplish when he came to earth. The title, Son of Man, was especially significant because it emphasized both the humanity and the divine authority of this coming figure. He would be truly human, someone who could understand and relate to the struggles and sufferings of ordinary people. But he would also have divine authority and power that would enable him to accomplish things that no ordinary human being could ever do. He would bridge the gap between heaven and earth in a way that no one else could. According to Enoch's visions, the Son of Man would serve as the ultimate judge of all the earth. He would have the authority to separate righteous people from wicked people and to reward each group according to what they deserved. This judgment would not be based on human standards of success or failure, but on God's perfect standards of righteousness and justice. The Son of Man would see into people's hearts and judge them according to their true character and their real relationship with God. The Book of Enoch describes the Son of Man as sitting on a glorious throne and having all authority given to him by God himself. Kings and rulers and powerful people from all over the world would come before this throne and be judged according to how they had used their power and authority during their lives on earth. Those who had oppressed the poor and innocent would be punished, while those who had protected and helped the weak would be rewarded. But the Son of Man would not just be a judge who punished the wicked. He would also be a savior who rescued the righteous and established a kingdom where they could live in peace and security forever. Enoch saw visions of a new earth where violence and corruption would be completely eliminated and where people would live in harmony with each other and with God. This new kingdom would be ruled by the Son of Man according to principles of perfect justice and love. One of the most remarkable things about Enoch's prophecies concerning the Son of Man is how they describe his pre-existence. According to the Book of Enoch, this person existed with God in heaven before the world was created. He was not just a human being who would be born at a particular time in history, but an eternal being who had always existed as part of God's plan for creation. This makes the Son of Man a figure of cosmic significance, whose coming would be the culmination of God's purposes from the very beginning of time. The Book of Enoch also describes how the coming of the Son of Man would be preceded by a time of great trouble and persecution for righteous people. Enoch saw that before the final establishment of God's kingdom, there would be periods when evil seemed to triumph and when faithful people would suffer greatly for their commitment to God. But these times of trouble would not last forever. They would be followed by the intervention of the Son of Man. who would bring justice and deliverance to those who had remained faithful during the difficult times. Another important aspect of Enoch's prophecies about the Son of Man concerns his role in revealing hidden knowledge and wisdom. Just as the fallen angels had corrupted humanity by sharing forbidden knowledge, the Son of Man would restore proper knowledge and understanding to the world. He would teach people the true nature of God, the real meaning of righteousness, and the correct way to live in harmony with God's design for creation. The wisdom that the Son of Man would bring would be completely different from the knowledge that the Watchers had shared with humanity. Where the fallen angels had taught techniques for making war and practicing magic and seeking selfish advantage, the Son of Man would teach principles of peace, love, service to others, and humble obedience to God. His teaching would heal the corruption that had been introduced by the rebellion of the Watchers and would restore humanity to the relationship with God that had been intended from the beginning. Enoch's visions also showed him that the coming of the Son of Man would involve some kind of resurrection of righteous people who had died. These faithful people would be brought back to life to participate in the kingdom that the Son of Man would establish on earth. This was an incredible promise that gave hope to people who were suffering persecution or who were grieving the loss of loved ones who had died for their faith. The resurrection that Enoch foresaw was not just a return to ordinary earthly life. It was a transformation to a new and better kind of existence, where people would no longer be subject to death, disease, or the corruption that had plagued the world since the rebellion of the Watchers. The righteous would receive new bodies that would be perfect and eternal, enabling them to enjoy the blessings of God's kingdom forever, without any fear of losing them again. Perhaps most remarkably, Enoch's prophecies about the Son of Man included predictions about his relationship with his followers. Enoch saw that this coming figure would not rule as a distant and unapproachable monarch, but as someone who would be intimately connected with the people he came to save. He would understand their struggles, share their sufferings, and provide them with comfort and strength during difficult times. These prophecies about a coming Messiah or Son of Man were not unique to the Book of Enoch, but they were more detailed and comprehensive than similar prophecies found in other ancient Jewish writings. When the early Christians read these prophecies after Jesus had lived, died, and risen from the dead, they saw remarkable similarities between what Enoch had predicted and what Jesus had actually accomplished. This is one reason why many early Christian leaders held the Book of Enoch in high regard, even if they did not consider it to be part of the official biblical canon. Why the Church removed this ancient book? For hundreds of years after it was written, the Book of Enoch was widely read and respected by both Jewish and Christian communities. Many religious teachers quoted from it, students studied it alongside other scriptures, and believers found comfort and instruction in its prophecies and teachings. However, as Christianity spread throughout the Roman Empire, and church leaders began to make decisions about which books should be included in the official Bible, most of them decided not to include the Book of Enoch. Understanding why they made this decision helps us appreciate both the challenges they faced and the significance of the book itself. The process of deciding which books belonged in the Bible was not easy or simple. Church leaders had to consider many different factors as they tried to determine which writings were truly inspired by God and which ones, however good they might be, were merely human compositions. They had to think about questions like whether a book had been written by the person whose name was attached to it, whether its teachings were consistent with other accepted scriptures, and whether it had been widely accepted by Christian communities over a long period of time. One of the main concerns that church leaders had about the Book of Enoch was the question of its authorship. While the book claimed to have been written by the ancient patriarch Enoch, who lived before the flood, most scholars believed that it had actually been written much later by someone else who had used Enoch's name to give authority to their writings. This practice, called pseudepigraphy, was common in ancient times and was not necessarily considered dishonest, but it did raise questions about whether the book should be treated as authentic scripture. Church leaders were also concerned about some of the detailed descriptions and teachings contained in the Book of Enoch. The book spent a great deal of time describing the activities of angels, both good and evil, in ways that went far beyond what was described in other biblical books. Some leaders worried that focusing too much on angels might distract people from focusing on God Himself, or might lead them into unhealthy speculation about spiritual matters that were beyond human understanding. The Book of Enoch also contained very detailed descriptions of heaven, hell, the future judgment, and the end times that were much more elaborate than the descriptions found in accepted biblical books. While these descriptions were fascinating and often inspiring, some church leaders felt that they went beyond what God had chosen to reveal through other scriptures. They worried that people might become more interested in these dramatic descriptions than in the basic message of salvation through faith in Jesus Christ. Another factor that influenced the decision was the question of which communities had preserved and used the book. By the time that church leaders were making decisions about the biblical canon, the Book of Enoch had largely disappeared from Jewish communities and was primarily preserved by Christians in Ethiopia and other parts of Africa. Some leaders may have felt that a book that was not widely used by the mainstream Jewish and Christian communities should not be included in the official biblical collection. There were also concerns about some of the theological ideas presented in the Book of Enoch. While most of its teachings were consistent with other biblical books, there were some details about the nature of angels, the process of judgment, and the establishment of God's kingdom that seemed to go beyond or even conflict with teachings found in accepted scriptures. Church leaders wanted to make sure that the books included in the Bible presented a consistent and clear message about God's character and His plan for salvation. The decision to exclude the Book of Enoch from most versions of the Bible was not made because church leaders thought the book was evil or completely false. Many of them acknowledged that it contained valuable insights and that it had been helpful to many believers over the centuries. However, they felt that it did not meet the strict criteria that they had established for determining which books were truly inspired by God and essential for the church's teaching and worship. It is important to understand that these decisions were made by sincere and devout Christian leaders who were trying their best to preserve the authentic message of God for future generations. They were working without the benefit of modern archaeological discoveries or scholarly research methods, and they had to make judgments based on the information that was available to them at the time. Their primary concern was to ensure that the church would have access to the most reliable and authoritative writings about God's revelation to humanity. Different Christian communities made different decisions about the Book of Enoch. While most Western churches excluded it from their biblical canons, the Ethiopian Orthodox Church continued to include it as part of their official Bible. They believed that the book was genuinely ancient and that it contained authentic revelations from God that were valuable for instruction and worship. To this day, Ethiopian Christians read and study the Book of Enoch as part of their regular scripture study. The exclusion of the Book of Enoch from most versions of the Bible does not mean that the book has no value for modern readers. Many scholars and believers today study it as an important example of ancient Jewish and Christian literature that helps us understand how people in biblical times thought about God, angels, judgment, and the future. The book provides valuable historical and cultural background that can help us better understand the world in which Jesus lived and the early Christian church developed. Recent discoveries, including the finding of fragments of the Book of Enoch among the Dead Sea Scrolls, have confirmed that the book is genuinely ancient and that it was widely known and respected in Jewish communities during the time when the New Testament was being written. This has led many modern scholars to take a renewed interest in the book and to appreciate its significance for understanding the religious and cultural context of early Christianity. The artificial intelligence discoveries that are the focus of this documentary add another dimension to our understanding of why the Book of Enoch is significant. If computer analysis is revealing hidden patterns, mathematical structures, and scientific insights that were not apparent to earlier readers, this suggests that the book may contain layers of meaning and sophistication that previous generations of scholars and church leaders were not able to detect. The Dead Sea Scrolls. Vindication. For more than 1,000 years, most of the world had forgotten about the Book of Enoch. Scholars knew that such a book had once existed because other ancient writers mentioned it, but complete copies could not be found anywhere in the Western world. Some people began to wonder whether the book had ever really existed, or whether the references to it in other ancient writings were mistakes or legends. This situation changed dramatically in the 20th century, with one of the most important archaeological discoveries in human history. In 1947, a young Bedouin shepherd boy was looking for a lost goat in the rocky hills near the Dead Sea, in what is now Israel and Palestine. While searching among the cliffs and caves, he threw a stone into one of the cave openings and heard the sound of breaking pottery. When he and his companions investigated, they discovered clay jars containing ancient scrolls that had been hidden in the cave for nearly 2,000 years. This accidental discovery led to one of the most intensive archaeological investigations ever conducted. Over the next several years, archaeologists explored 11 caves in the area and found hundreds of scrolls and scroll fragments that had been preserved by the dry desert climate. These documents, which became known as the Dead Sea Scrolls, provided an unprecedented window into the religious life and beliefs of Jewish communities during the time when Jesus lived. Among the many important discoveries in the Dead Sea Scrolls were multiple copies of parts of the Book of Enoch. These copies were written in Aramaic, which was one of the original languages of the book, and they could be dated to between the 3rd century before Christ and the 1st century after Christ. This meant that the copies were at least 1,500 years older than any complete manuscripts of the Book of Enoch that had previously been known to exist. The discovery of the Book of Enoch among the Dead Sea Scrolls was significant for several reasons. First, it proved beyond any doubt that the book was genuinely ancient, and that it had not been invented by later writers who had simply made up stories about an ancient book. The Aramaic copies found in the caves were clearly very old, and they contained the same basic stories and teachings that were found in the later Ethiopian copies of the book. Second, the presence of multiple copies of the Book of Enoch in the Dead Sea collection showed that the book had been widely read and highly valued by at least some Jewish communities during the time period when the New Testament was being written. The people who lived in the settlement near the caves, probably members of a religious group called the Essenes, had considered the Book of Enoch important enough to copy it multiple times and to preserve it carefully, along with other sacred writings.